And thank you for joining us on our Career Conversations podcast. Today, we are talking to Dr. Wang, who was a Beckman Scholar at UT Austin and is now working in industry. And so we're very excited to get to know you a little bit better and hear about your career path. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Anne. I'm excited to tell you more about the path I took to get to industry.
So we always like to start sort of way back at the beginning. What was your first entry into science? What got you really excited? What part of science really hooked you to start a career in that?
So I've always been a bit interested in science as a kid, but it never really occurred to me that it could be something to make a career out of. It was kind of just like I viewed it more as a hobby, growing up through elementary school, middle school, high school, and I think when my passion for science really started was in freshman year, and it's when I joined a lab. So. Um, Prior to joining a lab, I heard research was something that I should do from my academic advisors, and that what made me want to get into a lab. But it was just because I heard it was something good to do from an academics and education perspective. I didn't really have a genuine interest until actually started that lab and really understood the process of doing research, both the joys of discovering something new and also some of the frustrations of trying things and it not working. But when I was joining a lab, I was approaching it in a similar way to enrolling in a class. I just sent out a bunch of emails to the professors and seeing who would bite. And so the person that would really be the catalyst for my interest in research, I would say, is my undergrad PI, Grant Wilson. And to this day, I'm incredibly grateful that he took me on. I was just a college freshman.
Yeah.
I knew nothing from his perspective. And, he really took a chance and he took the time to teach me. So he is the person I want to highlight here for being my catalyst.
So was that usual at UT Austin? They say freshmen go ahead and email professors and try to get in a lab? Or?
I don't think it was usual, but they did have strong messaging for doing research. I think they were a bit more conservative on the timeline. They didn't encourage freshmen to directly email professors, but maybe I was trying to be a bit of an overachiever in that aspect. So I just cold emailed a bunch of professors, and rightfully got ignored by 99% of them.
Yeah. Well, you got the one that counted.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. What kind of research were you working on?
So the lab was a photolithography lab, and broadly it was organic chemistry and polymer science. So photolithography is the process of printing using light. And the semiconductor industry uses this to print very small patterns on silicon wafers, and that's how they make computer chips. So I was working on making new chemicals to formulate into the material they use for this process.
So were you approaching it from chemistry or computer science? Like, what was your interest where you said this is really cool? Like what
Yeah,
really yeah.
it was definitely chemistry and specifically organic synthesis. I thought it was so cool to just, be able to make any molecule you want to out of building blocks. Um, to me, it kind of reminded me of making things out of Legos in a way, right? You
Mhm.
have these building blocks and you can put them together, and you have to find creative ways to put them together, and then you can make what you want. And another thing I really enjoyed about the lab was actually having an application and being able to test it. So you could take your molecule, make it in the formulation, and fire some lasers or light at the formulation and see how it behaves.
So did you do that for 4 years at Austin? Was that also part of your scholars program?
Yeah, it was. And it was, I unfortunately, well, I only did it for 3 years since I ended up graduating after 3 years. But
Oh, for
yeah,
you.
yeah, I was
Overachiever, sorry, I forgot.
I was very heavily engaged in research during the whole time I was at UT. Actually, it's funny. Some people I met thought I was a grad student at some point. I was just spending so much time in the lab.
So you went then to MIT, right? So what inspired you to do that? And can you talk a little bit about sort of that grad school process and how you selected a mentor to work with there?
Yeah, so after undergrad, I had a lot of experience in chemistry, but I will say I always had this curiosity for biology. That was the maybe my first science love. And in high school, you take biology at ninth grade and the chemistry in 10th grade. And I remember, taking biology and being like, this is the best thing ever. And then, it just so happened by the nature of just emailing a billion professors and just getting the first person who responds, you didn't necessarily hand pick the research topic. I really enjoyed working on photolithography, but I wanted to go a bit more back to the biology. So going to grad school, I took that as opportunity to learn more about how to apply organic chemistry and polymer science into biology. And then I wanted to apply to schools that had a strong focus on polymeric materials for uh, just biomaterials, basically.
Mhm.
And that narrowed it down a lot. And it ended up being between a couple schools. It was a very, very hard decision. And really, what I ended up doing is just rolling the dice because it's just so hard to pick. Everyone I asked that told me, there's really no bad decision. And I was like, I can't decide.
Well, I mean, MIT doesn't sound like you made a bad choice there, right? Like, you enjoy your time there
Yeah,
and get to pursue what you were hoping for.
yeah. So I joined Paula Hammond's lab, and there I was working on synthetic polypeptides for biomaterials in applications in tissue engineering and drug delivery. So that was really rewarding to see the intersection of what I learned in undergrad and being able to apply to some new fields in grad school.
Cool. And then you went to industry.
Yep, yep. So I after grad school, um, I well, near the end of grad school, I saw enough of academia to make a decision that I didn't want this for the rest of my life. So
Mhm.
I wanted to explore industry because that was the only other kind of alternative I knew. So, maybe this is just what I do, but I applied to a bunch of jobs and um, I would say getting an industry position right out of grad school with no postdoc wasn't very straightforward. It was quite difficult. I sent out a lot of applications, and I have a few friends that have a similar experience, and we all just bonded over how difficult it was to get a job. But I ended up taking the first offer that I got. It was a really good offer, and also I didn't have the energy to going through the job searching process while writing my thesis and trying to wrap up my research. And that turned out to be a role for an application scientist at an instrument company. So, what an application scientist does is basically they go around to different labs that are interested in the technology. So in this case, it was the company was Wyatt, and they work on light scattering instrumentation. So I would go around to different labs and demo this technology, show how they can use it to do analytics on whatever molecules or polymers they were making. And then also, if they already had this equipment, I would help them develop analytical methods for it.
Okay. So kind of in a sales role almost.
In a way, but I wasn't doing the sales. I was doing the science. We had a salesperson that we would partner with.
Mhm.
So they would know deeply the sales, and my job was really to know the science, but
Mhm.
there was a bit of intermingling in a way, right? Because obviously you want to have a good result.
Right. Yeah. For the company. Yeah.
Yeah, or yeah, exactly.
So can you go back just a little bit? What did you really find difficult about that application process? And I'm also kind of curious how did your professors at MIT help you or not?
Yeah,
If that yeah.
I think the lack of industry experience makes it difficult. And really, it's just like breaking into a new role of anything, going from academia to industry. I think a lot of people in industry see that you have no industry experience, and they think, oh, this person has no industry experience. It's a risk. And I was able to get some help from my PI. For example, she was I think on the scientific advisory board of Moderna. This was back when Moderna was like a no-name company
Right.
before they
Sure.
made the COVID vaccine. But I remember her, putting in a good word for me. But it just turned out that uh, I didn't get the role and they told me it's because they wanted someone with more experience actually. So I think getting your first industry job may be a challenge just because you don't have industry experience. And actually, one thing that I think might be helpful for those who are looking to go into industry later or even considering it is to do an internship in industry. It's
Mhm.
not something that is commonly talked about in academia, and I have basically no friends in the chemistry department that did an internship in
Mhm.
industry. But now that I'm in industry, I see, oh wow, there are actually a lot of opportunities for people to do internships if they want to. How come, I did it like no one's ever heard of this in academia or whatnot? So um, yeah, if you're considering it, I would encourage you to check it out.
And do you think a postdoc would have helped? As you're in industry now, is sort of a postdoc considered a quasi industry
Yeah,
experience?
I think a postdoc would have helped for sure. But not as much as perhaps maybe internship. And even now they have what they call industry postdocs, right? You would kind of do a postdoc, but you would do it in industry setting, and it's a bit of a hybrid where you get to work in that industry setting, but depending on the postdoc program, the expectations might be that you still publish, etc., like what you would try to do and get out of a regular postdoc. So they have those as well. But in my mind, if when I was considering this, I was thinking, well, if this is just going to be a stepping stone toward an industry role, I might as well just go directly to the industry role if I can. Yeah.
Mhm. So what's the biggest difference between working in an industry lab and working in an academic environment, would
I,
you
I
say?
think I think there's a lot more resources in industry and there's a lot more support. But with the support also comes a lot more hierarchy or some red tape. In academia, it's very much like you do everything yourself. Um, but in industry, you have a lot more resources. You have people to help you, but then you actually have to get their help, right? You have to go through certain channels most of the time to do things, and that can take a while, but it can also be less work. It's kind of a mixed bag. I think that's the main difference. Another one is that you can't just work on what you think is interesting. You need to be working on very specific problems. That being said, though, I don't think academia entirely is you can work on anything you want to, right? You still have to work on what will get you grants,
Yeah.
right? So but I think industry is like that, but multiplied by 100. Like you really have to work on what will bring in the money for the company.
Yeah. So you've moved to BioMarin. Was the second job search easier? Did that experience
Oh,
on your
it
end?
was unbelievable much easier. Yeah, I think when I was looking for that role. It was after 1 year at Wyatt. The application scientist position was interesting. It was really cool. I got to work remote before COVID happened, so I was working remote before, that was actually a thing. You get to travel a bunch. You're almost like a consultant, but you're still working on science. But after doing that for a year, I wanted to go back to more of a traditional research scientist role at a pharmaceutical company. And so I applied to, I think that was the only role I applied to, and I got the position. So, it's like way easier, just from those numbers. Yeah, it was, I think after you get your first industry job, the other ones come much easier.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing. We're kind of getting towards the end of our time here, and I'd just like to pass it back to you. I think you shared some good tidbits. Is there anything else that you would share in addition to, exploring some of those internship opportunities and of someone who's considering, how do I fit into an industry role? Any advice?
So I I think getting exposure to industry would be the biggest thing you could do if you actually want to go into industry. Another thing is, industry is quite broad. Even just me, I've had quite a few different experiences in industry, right? I was doing an application scientist role, which is, almost a bit salesy at a scientific instrument company, and then I went to uh, at a biotech as a more traditional scientist role. But even within biotechs, you can have be working on a development of a drug that's very late phase or be an early discovery. And the differences between those positions is also um, very big, right? So there's actually a lot you can do in industry. And it wasn't until I actually started working in industry that I appreciated how much um, how much the breadth can be in terms of positions. Whereas in academia, you move around from lab to lab. The research is different, but fundamentally, it's a bit of the same idea of trying to discover something new. Where in industry, of course, you're trying to discover something new, but it can take on a lot more different forms than academia. So if you're thinking about industry, maybe also look into that a little bit, and it might be helpful to have some uh, personal conversations with people in industry, or find some people in industry that are willing to discuss what their day to day is like, and see if that's something you're interested in.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And best
Yeah,
of luck.
thanks, Ann. Yeah, it was a pleasure. And also best of luck to all the young scientists out there hoping to find their way.